I can't really remember when it first happened, but Mike Palin and I had been working for the Frost Reports, I suppose through 1966, something like that. And in probably late 66 or early 67, I got a phone call from Humphrey Barclay, who had been at Cambridge and was a young, thrusting young producer in light entertainment for Rediffusion. And he asked me if I'd like to combine with Eric Idle and write and perform a children's show, which he'd already decided was going to be called Do Not Adjust Your Set. So I sort of talked this over with Mike Palin, and we thought, well, maybe we should give it a go, because really we were desperate to actually start performing our own material, because, well, to tell the truth, we got a bit fed up with writing stuff for people. I'm afraid, like people like Marty Feldman, for example, and we'd write these sketches for them, and then and they'd say, oh yeah, they're really funny, and then you'd see them when they actually go on, and they take the idea and then sort of, I don't know, go off and do something totally different. They start improvising or something like that, and then to us they spoil the sketches sometimes. So we were kind of keen to actually be able to perform our own stuff. So that's really how Do Not Adjust Your Set came about. We got together with Eric Idle, and it was Michael Palin and myself and Eric Idle writing the material. And then David Jason and Denise Coffey were brought in as performers.
Do not adjust your set. Oi!
Met Eric actually in Edinburgh when we did the last Oxford Review, and Eric was doing Cambridge Footlights in Edinburgh. This must have been about sort of 64, and we had one evening where the Oxford and Cambridge reviews got together. We did it after our performance. We did an extra performance, must have been about 12 o'clock at night or something, and we did Rejects Night, we called it. And we got the Cambridge lot in as well, and we had ours. We read out all the sketches that we hadn't actually managed to finish. So we'd do these sketches, either read them out or perform them, reading them. And then when we got to the bit where we gave up, we just scrambled them up and put them in a dustbin. Yeah, I think the first series, I think it went out at 4:30 or something in the afternoon because it was a children's show. But I think in the second series, they started repeating them at about 7 o'clock because there were complaints from people, from companies saying that adults were hurrying home to try and catch this show because they heard it was funny or something. So we sort of felt rather pleased with ourselves. Mark You, the first time it went out, it was the most horrible thing because we had to do the shows live. And because in those days the Rediffusion didn't want to. In those days, you had to actually cut the tape. I mean, it wasn't even they didn't even have electronic editing. You actually had to physically cut the tape. So this meant that the editor had to look through a microscope and see where the magnetic pulses were, and then cut in between the pulses to actually join a piece of tape together. Just like film. And evidently, if they cut the tape, then the tape was it wasn't worth 40 quid anymore. So we were under strict orders that we mustn't do any editing. So we had to do a live show. When it first went out, the first show went out, I can remember going home, I think it was, to watch it, and it was just awful because the show went out, and then there was a sort of 4-minute gap where they had adverts, and for some reason, they'd forgotten to record any adverts. And so the show went out, and there was just 4 minutes of nothing happening before the second half, and it looked terrible. For remuneration, Mike and Eric and I were being paid £100, split between the three of us, for writing and performing Do Not Adjust Your Set. I know that seems a bit ridiculous now, but I suppose it wasn't too bad in 1967 when we started doing the shows. I remember Mike and I were being paid 7 guineas a minute. They used to do things in guineas. If people don't know what guineas are, it's a £1, 1 shilling. If you don't know what a shilling is, I can't tell you. We were being paid 7 guineas a minute for material that we wrote for the David Frost shows, for the Frost Reports. And so we'd spend a week working, and we'd be lucky to get 2 minutes, material on the show because it's quite tough. He had a lot of writers, really. So we were sort of taking home about £14 a week, 14 guineas a week, I'm sorry, which we then have to split between us. And then Jimmy Gilbert, who was producing and directing the Frost Reports, had pity on us, I think, really, and allowed us to actually act in some of the little. We used to write these little film inserts for the Frost Reports, things like where do judges go when they retire, and we'd sort of see a judge going out of a courtroom, and then they go into this kiddies' playground, and all these other judges arrive, and they all go up on the swings and roundabouts and things, and he'd allow us to go and be the extras, really, be actors in that. And we got £20 a week for that each. £20 a week each.
I was working in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. For my monster from the slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise, he did the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It caught on in a flash. He did the monster mash.
The Bonzos, well, again, that was because of Do Not Just Your Set. That's how we got to know them. And I think it was Humphrey Barclay who admired the Bonzos and got them in as well. And we're jolly grateful he did, because we think they're wonderful. And of course, Neil Innes, who wrote quite a lot of their stuff, sort of became, the sort of the seventh Python kind of thing in a way. He started doing musical things for us, and in the last series he appears occasionally. And when we did theatre shows, Neil would come along and do musical bits in the theatre shows.
Life's like that, isn't it?
Yes, Terry Gilliam started hanging around. I think it must have been when we were doing series 1 and started contributing a few sketches. I think John Cleese had put him in touch with us because he'd met John in New York, and John must have said, "Oh, these chaps doing this funny little children's show, so why don't you go along and join in with them?" Evidently, Terry says that Mike Palin and I were very sort of a bit sort of iffy and didn't really weren't very welcoming, but Eric was very, 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 very welcoming and brought him in. And I think that Terry must have contributed 1 or 2 sketches to the first series, but it was in the second series when he started doing animations, and so he did 2, I think it was. The first animation he did was about a Christmas card. And it was a wonderful sort of tour de force on the Christmas cards. And then the second one, he said, well, this is a sort of more difficult, this one, because it's sort of, it's just a sort of chain of consciousness. I call it elephants. And it just goes from one thing to another. It's got no real theme to it. And in a way, that cartoon became very seminal, because when we were setting up Monty Python, I was trying to think of a way how we could make Python different and give it a different cohesion to other sketch shows that had been on television. And I'd seen Spike Milligan, and Spike Milligan had broken all the rules. In those days, we used to do sketches, which were 3-minute sketches with a beginning, middle, and end, or you do a 30-second blackout, which is 30 seconds with a punchline at the end. And that's what we're doing in Do Not Adjust Your Set. Milligan started doing things where one sketch would just sort of wouldn't have an ending, it would just go into something else. So he just totally broke the form. And it seemed to me that you could marry what Spike Milligan had done in Q4 and Terry's Elephants animation, and you could have things running into each other, and you could use Terry's animation to help this flow. And so that's what we did with Python. That's how Python got its kind of free-form flow.
As usual, I was having my lunch when...
Captain Fantastic came about because Mike and I thought it would be a good idea to have a sort of a running character through the shows, and I think I came up with the idea of Captain Fantastic, and between us we thought of this guy, the greengrocer guy, who didn't really do anything fantastic at all, and wasn't really, we had sort of various scenarios, quite sort of ambitious scenarios with lots of wonderful visual ideas. I think one of them was called Captain Fantastic and the World Eaters, and there was all these people going to eat the world, and we got all these very elaborate gags about people eating things and then disappearing. But I think what happened was that it was a little bit too ambitious, and when David and Denise would go off and shoot these episodes, and we couldn't because we were writing the next shows, I think. So we were too busy, and they went so they went off and actually sort of kind of took our basic ideas, but really never filmed. It was really just David doing a lot of slapstick and sort of slightly improvising on the kind of the vague themes that we'd written about. Yes, the Concorde sketch. Gosh, I'd only just seen that for the first time for a long time. I'd totally forgotten about it, I have to say. Well, of course, Concorde, it would be 1969. It was just coming in at that time. I remember people saying that one of the objections to Concorde was that it would deplete the ozone layer. And it's kind of curious, like 20 years later, we got worries about the ozone layer, and nobody ever mentions Concorde. Anyway, you see the sketch again. It was, I don't know, it's just one of those ideas about English boffins, the idea they think it's a ship, they've got it wrong. Made me laugh, anyway.
My name is André Lecour, and I am the chief liaison officer for the French section of the Concorde. And my government has sent me here to see how you are progressing with the aeroplane.
The what?
With the Concorde aeroplane.
Oh, you mean HMS Concorde?
No. I mean the Concorde supersonic aeroplane.
Oh. Ah. Oh. Well, hang on a sec. I think there's been a bit of a mistake. You see, we're building a ship.
I think one of the great things about it is seeing Mike Palin's performances. I mean, I think Mike and Eric, you can both see them still there. Eric doing his sort of his very fast commentator pieces and remembering names and great tour de force of memory. Very smooth, very very accurate sort of performance. And David very good on the slapstick, and Denise looks very good too, I think. But Mike is also comes out with these really stunning little performances of characterization, which is what Mike was always so great at. Things like the stool pigeon sketch, where Mike comes in as amongst some crooks who are planning a burglary, and Mike comes in as the policeman, pretending to be another member of the gang, and so obviously a policeman.
Hey, Magsy. Hey? Oh, all right, Tom, Maisie. Now listen carefully, because this could be one of the greatest raids. It's one of the greatest raids ever planned. Right? Now look, we leave the garage in Duke Street at exactly 10 o'clock. Yeah. And the brown car, right? Yeah.
Brown car?
And the brown...
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Oh, sorry, sir, I just want the facts.
Look, you don't write anything down. You keep it there in your head, in your E-double-D, your head.
Well, my influences I really went back to sort of silent film. Buster Keaton was always my great hero. He was the person I wanted to emulate. Actually, Jacques Tati as well, to a certain extent. I think it was seeing Jacques Tati convinced me you should be able to do silent comedy even in a world of sound. But also, I think when we actually started writing material, I think Mark and I were sort of we were very influenced, I think, by Graham and John's stuff in Last 1948 show. Very much like the what would you say, the sort of the surreal element of it when it takes flights of fantasy, and that's I think that's something that we also were very impressed by. Some of the stuff you think, how on earth did they think of that? I think Do Not Adjust Your Set was very important for us because it was Mike, me and Eric working together for the first time, and we kind of got used to each other and writing together, although it was still really Mike and me writing stuff, and then Eric getting together with Eric, and then we shaped the shows and everything. So we were providing the scripts. And then when Terry Gilliam got involved in the second series with the cartoons, we kind of felt that we had a strong writing base there. And after the second series, Mike and I didn't really want to go on doing Do Not Adjust Your Set. And I think at that time John Cleese rang up and suggested doing something. Well, he really wanted to work with Mike, I think, and And so Mike came along with me and Eric and Terry Gilliam in tow. So, and we knew Mike, we knew John Cleese and Graham Chapman's stuff from at last the 1948 show. So in fact, Monty Python was really Do Not Adjust Your Set meets the 1948 show, and that's how it came about, really.